When we say freehand ink drawing, we're talking about drawing directly in ink. There's no pencil under drawing. Now that means we can't block things out. We also don't use rulers. We make all of our marks freely with our hand, freehand. So the challenge is we can't rough things out and then erase the pencil that we don't want at the end. We have to draw in a way that we can navigate accurately directly in pen. So this is my method. And let me tell you, I make quite a big mistake. Well, it's a big mistake for me. I won't tell you when I make it. I'll tell you about 15 seconds after I make it. So see if you can spot the blunder I make. I didn't see it till close to the end when something else I was drawing made me realize, uh-oh. But you see what I'm doing, and you're watching this at double speed. So this took me about 25 minutes to draw in real time. It's a fairly brisk pace for this town hall, New South Wales Country Town Hall. So what I'm trying to do is capture the feel. I'm not trying to be precise. I'm not trying to get absolutely every line that we can see in the reference on my drawing, but I want to capture the feel, the vibe, if you like, the effect of the detail that's here, which is particularly important with all these horizontal cornices. So I start with one column and I really try hard to get that accurately drawn, the proportions looking somewhat correct. And then from that I move out, and you saw I put a bit of paper on that first column, and that was just to check whether that halfway mark where the arch comes down to and we have a little line is actually halfway in the column, and it is. So that helped me position that better. But it's always good to try and estimate it with our mind first and then see if we were right or wrong, because that sharpens our estimation skills. So now I'm adding this little, I think it's called a broken pediment because the base of the pediment is not there. And so then I go across the distance. I look horizontally at my subject. I look at the width. I estimate that. And then I add the other column because I can align it with the first column. And in this way of drawing, this freehand way of drawing, using what we've already drawn as a reference point is crucial. It's essential, in fact, in my thinking, for an overall accurate drawing. The one critical thing, though, to remember is that our lines have a width that what the lines represent in our subject, in our photo, don't have. The edge of the columns is not a line. My line, as thin as it is wider than the edge that I see in the reference. And when we have a lot of vertical or horizontal edges stacked above or alongside each other, as I draw each of them, I have to allow for the thickness of my line, because otherwise I'll end up going too wide. And if you go too wide too often, doing what I've done here and putting some tape around the edges or even drawing a pencil box is a helpful way to give you another reference point. I actually do it because it gives me clean edges with the things that I draw at the sides or the top or bottom, but it serves that reference point really well as well. See what I do now? I'm doing things that are the same and at the same level at the same time. I'm moving across horizontally as well as moving up vertically, and this helps me to get things lined up. I go from one to the next to the next to the next. Often where I have a row of windows such as this, I'll do the same connection piece right the way across all the windows at once. I don't try and draw any one window because the challenge is to line things up. And you see, I'm checking my reference, lining things up. Oh, look, I have made my mistake. I made it a couple of minutes ago. Did you notice it? Can you see it now? Well, I guess I can tell you now. It's, if you look at the two columns in the center, then there's that horizontal sort of grey banding just above the capitals. And then there's another section. And I left out those steps. So my pediment, my broken pediment, was too close to the columns. So I've left out that band. And that's why I had some problems working out the pediment, that I couldn't work out why it wasn't working out. So anyway, that's what I did. And so I thought, well, I'd already drawn this much and I wanted it to be a fairly quick drawing anyway. So I thought, look, I'm not going to redraw it. Let's also use it as an example of when we see things that perhaps aren't as accurate as we'd like, just keep going and work that into the drawing. So see how my drawing looks at the end and think, well, would you tell? Would you know? Because I've still benefited in doing this from all the other things that did work out. And so when I'm drawing these windows, I'm particularly looking at the gaps between them. I pay just as much attention drawing the gaps between things as I do paying attention to the things themselves. I'm also keeping note of edges and comparing that to how far I am from the edges in my reference. So notice how I don't get precious with these dark shadows behind these little boxes in the top of the windows. I want to keep a nice, fairly lively mark making throughout the whole drawing. So now I have these vents to put in, and I'm aware that the vent I put in at first was too small, and they're all the same size, so I'm making these ones a little bit smaller too. So nice brisk lines. I'm using a 0.1 Unipin pen, as you can probably tell. They very conveniently put the size down near the nib, so always aware of it. I'm holding it fairly well back, not as well back as I often do, but particularly for these details, you see, I'm trying to do these arches. So I've actually moved my fingers way down closer to the end for greater control. And the same with these little things here. But when I go back to drawing lines, I'll be surprised if my hand doesn't just naturally slide back up towards the end. Please hit the like button if you're finding this and other videos on my channel helpful. Freehand ink drawing is a wonderful skill to develop because especially if we have trouble with perfectionism, because it forces us to be less precious about every mark and work towards the overall impact of our scene. I reached the point where with doing pencil underdrawing, I felt like I was going in reverse gear. I was erasing more than I was actually leaving on the paper. And that just made me very tense when I wanted to be actually quite loose in my mark making. So now you see I didn't do the end of the building. I didn't do the right hand side of that pilaster, that squared off column attached to the building, because I could see that there was something in front of it. So I had to preserve that paper to be able to put the ink. I didn't want to draw it over the ink, the tree over the vertical line of the pilaster. Notice how my marks for the tree, which I won't draw till the end, but my mark, because I don't want to break the rhythm of drawing the building, but I had to preserve that space. Notice how that feels like it's in front of the building. And if I'd just drawn it over the top, ink over ink, well, we still could have told what it was. This is when I think I discovered that I hadn't done those points down below, those inset points. And notice how I go back and forth from one to the other with these spheres. But yes, if I'd just drawn it over the top, it would have really just clashed it together. And although we would have understood it, we wouldn't have the sense of depth. And when I finish the whole tree, it's quite important because when I do the left-hand side, I actually don't draw that whatever's there in the photo. I just drew a small box hedge at the ground, and then as if there's some greenery further back. But it has a sense of sitting back nicely from the building, whereas on the right-hand side, the tree is sitting forward, and that gives a really, I think, effective depth of plane, sense of going back into space, into distance, which is always a good thing to try and capture. This section is a good example of how I go all along the line when I have lined up details. It really helps me keep everything nice and horizontal, or vertically if I need to go in the other direction. So if you tend to draw the one thing completely before you move on, why not try this method? Now notice here the ground slopes downwards, and if you think back to how I drew this, I basically drew it to the horizontal line, and I didn't draw the ground until quite late because I didn't want that to be providing some sort of optical illusion or optical distraction that would stop me thinking and seeing the box shape. So I left it out until I was confident I'd got most of it done. The shadow in this entranceway is a great example of building up layers of hatching to create the darkness we want, particularly when parts of what we're looking at are shaded differently. This white globe is closer to us, the white light, but there are other parts that for different reasons have different amounts of shadow. So by doing several layers angled slightly in different directions often, we can build up quite a nice realistic looking subtlety. So I mean, none of my lines, none of my curves are perfect, but if you have the same, if you like, the same degree of imperfection in everything you do, then it all combines together to present, I think, a lively feel, quite a dynamic movement feel. And if we were to use a ruler perhaps for a long straight line, it would kill that. It would actually introduce now a perfect line, which would make all the other lines look, well, pretty ordinary in comparison. So now, with one ruled line, or maybe a couple, we've made all of our lines look somehow messy in a way that they weren't before. Now, with this gutter in, I don't want to make it very prominent so I'm light, loose marks, gaps in the lines to help. Now look at that. I did that because, as in, went upwards with my vertical marks because I was suddenly distracted by something else in my drawing, and I stopped paying attention for a second to what I was doing, and that's fine, but I should have taken the pen off the paper the moment I stopped paying attention to what I was doing. So a little lesson there for me, and I hope for you at my expense. Now I'm doing this tree. Now look how quickly I'm doing it. I don't want to get bogged down with detail because the tree is a support act. It's not the main star, which is obviously the town hall. So I want to keep my mark making looser and a bit lighter, and the same with what's on the other side. So getting the balance so that we create the focus we want to have in our drawing is really important. So I think I finished that point. I was saying that when we combine ruled marks with freehand marks, we end up making our freehand marks look somehow inadequate, careless. But if they're all freehand, there's a cohesion visually that works together, I think, to often produce a really great feel, even if all the lines are fairly, well, let's just say loose, to be kind. It's a very forgiving way of drawing when we're consistent with it. So, time to take the tape off. Please hit that like button for me if you haven't already. I'll post this reference photo on my channel post page, so if you'd like to have a go drawing this yourself, why not? It's a great little subject. And why not try it freehand in ink and don't make the mistake I made. G'day, I'm Stephen Travis. So why not give this a go? Freehand ink drawing is a great way to draw. But whether you draw this or not, or whatever you draw next, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.